welcoming you all here tonight. For those of you who don't know who UA92 is, we are a deliberately different, modern higher education brand. And our mission is to make higher education accessible to all, and all being the really important word in that. So no matter what your background is, no matter what postcode you're from, higher education is an option for you here at UA92.
Go now? No? Yep. Okay. So I also want to welcome everybody in our virtual audience and anybody watching online. Hello and welcome to this monthly... Anyway, hopefully you can hear us. Mayor of Greater Manchester, Annie Burnham, here to answer your questions this evening. Some have already been sent in, and I've gone through them. I know you don't know them in advance, do you? And then we have some virtual questions as well. So I'm going to start with our first question this evening, which is on the clean air zone. I think we'll do all of those first, if that's okay with everybody. And the first question is for somebody that's in our audience tonight, and it comes from Adrian. Adrian Ledger. Hi, Adrian.
You decided on the size of the CAS scheme. Why can you not accept that you got it wrong and change it?
Well, good evening, by the way. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I mean, I know everyone says that, but I didn't. It's just a fact. There's no point in trying to claim credit for something that I didn't do. I'm trying to answer the question. So there'll be plenty of time to really, follow up on everything. This is a government directive on the 10 councils. So the 10 councils have the legal responsibility to clean up the air. I don't have, technically, a decision-making role in it. But I'm not going to say I have no role, because obviously I was involved in the discussions. But the size of the clean air zone went through the 10 councils. They had to themselves decide what their involvement was with the clean air zone and how they were going to address it. And of course it was done collectively. Because
3 of those councils were below the limits.
Well, I'm trying to answer the questions. I mean,
I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll come back and ask you in a minute, perhaps Adrian, but then we'll let you say something as well. But let the mayor just finish.
But technically, GM said, well, the best way of doing this is if you've got 150 points where there are exceedances. If you've got that situation, you can't have a sort of Swiss cheese of clean air zones all over the patch. That is what they decided. But unlike the West Midlands, the decision was to exclude cars. That was the decision that they reached. Now, we can debate it. So let's get into the questions, the follow-up questions, Annabelle, that everyone wants to ask.
Well, we're starting from a bad base because no one believes you to start with, okay? Your credibility has disappeared overnight, okay? So don't be misled with that, okay? If you don't have any authority over it, why are you sat here tonight, and why aren't the people that do have the authority sat here tonight? You're the mayor of the area, okay? So nobody voted for this. Hardly anybody knew about this before Christmas. And the only reason they know about this now, as you well know, is because certain social media sites were set up to inform people what was happening. You're rolling out the cameras for this under the cover of darkness and under the cover of COVID. You know everything that's going on. If you don't, you may as well pack your bags and leave now, because you should. And the whole thing is anti-democratic. So before you go back in July to Mr. Johnson and his cronies, you come to the people and you hold a referendum. That's the only thing that we, the people, are giving you a mandate to do.
Okay.
If you don't hold
so
a
would
referendum,
you hold a referendum
if
on
you
this?
don't hold a referendum, you are anti-democratic,
So, okay,
and you
let's
have
get the
no
answer.
right to be in office.
The thing you need to do is obviously go back to where this began. And where did this begin? It didn't begin with Greater Manchester. It began with the government. It is government policy. So you talk about whether or not you can have a referendum. We aren't in a position to unilaterally rip up a legal direction from the government.
But did Greater Manchester decide on the size of it? Because that was
I just
originally
acknowledged, in response to the gentleman,
The question I'm asking, whether you personally did it or not,
I accepted
are
that.
you accepting the size is wrong and it needs to change?
Well, so in answer to your question, I said that was a decision at the Greater Manchester level, but then ratified by the government, which they said was, they also said that is the right way to go. Now, so what I'm saying to you is, and I've been saying this all year, I had doubts last year about the plan and the way in which it would come into force in the kind of new world that we were in. This was a plan designed pre-pandemic for a very different scenario in a very different world. And the problem we had was they had a date of compliance on the councils that kind of came right after the pandemic, even though it wasn't going to be deliverable. And I started having doubts last year. It's why I asked Transport for Greater Manchester to commission research on what was going on in the vehicle market, because I was beginning to pick up from listening to people that it was going to get very, very challenging for them. And I said to the, if you just let me answer the question, if you don't mind.
I tell you what, we're going to come to you just in a sec, Adrian, if you can
You're
hold
shaking your
off
head.
and just let...
I think you have to hear a few facts. You come in here and assert as though you know everything, but you don't know it. You don't know, with respect, you don't know wait a second. From my point of view, you don't know everything. You don't know that I said to the 10 leaders of the Greater Manchester Councils last year, we are going to have to go back to the government, because in my view, from what I am hearing, this plan is not going to be deliverable. And I said that last year because I had already commissioned the research on what was going on. And when the campaign blew up early in the new year, in some ways I said straight away, well, I understand why there's a campaign, because I have got my own doubts about whether this is deliverable. So you sit there and suggest that you know everything about it, but you don't know everything about it. You can't have a referendum, because this is a legal direction from the government. Why have you chosen to put it all at the door of Greater Manchester and none of it at the door of the government?
Greater Manchester put the CAZ to the government, and the government authorised it. Yes, the government authorised your scheme.
Well, I can show you...
Where it is going wrong is that you are pronouncing there are 152 non-compliant sites in Greater Manchester, but your own TFGM survey of the whole of 2020 shows 2 out of 400. And I know that you will say that 2020 is an exceptional year, but each of those locational graphs shows the progressive decline in NO2 from 2016 onwards. We are now 2 years on from 2020. I think you'll find that as Euro 6 continually replaces Euro 5, The problem is going away of its own accord, and that, like Leeds and Coventry, the reality is that there is no legal justification for the introduction of the zone because we're already compliant.
Well, Adrian's original question was about the size of it, and there is a question there, isn't there? I mean,
Yes.
why are small residential roads, for instance, in, I don't know, as an example, somewhere in Stockport, why are they included in the same plan as the centre of Manchester?
Because the argument was, just to answer that one again, but it's a really important question, and it's a fair question. The boroughs decided that it would be too confusing to have smaller zones within boroughs and a scattering of smaller zones, and also potentially unfair to people living outside of those zones, unable to access the financial support, even though they would have to drive their vehicle through that zone. And bear in mind, although it doesn't feel like it to anybody, and I accept it doesn't, this was always designed as an incentive scheme, give people some support to change their vehicle and therefore clean up the air, and it's not about raising money. Just to answer your question about the role of the government, because here's government policy here. Here's government policy here. The councils, according to government policy, the only option that they were required to model was a charging clean air zone. That is their policy. And on your point about 2020 and 2021, you make a fair point, because clearly
I make an accurate point.
yes, and I'm saying.
I'd like to hear one from you today.
Well, I just said you made a fair point, which is a reflection of the fact that you are correct that 2020 there was a significant drop, but as you also said, that isn't an exceptional year. There's just no way anybody could argue that that year is a sort of benchmark year. There has, from the unverified data that I have seen, there has been a significant bounce back in 2021, and that isn't a normal year, because there were still lockdowns that took place in 2021. We are not the sole arbiters of the data. There's a body called the Joint Air Quality Unit that monitors the data, and they are the arbiters of whether or not we have a problem. We can't decide whether we have a problem or not. It has to be a joint decision between the government and Greater Manchester.
But I'm not reading contrary propaganda. I'm reading your own Transport for Greater Manchester website with 400 survey locations. 2 of those locations are non-compliant. One's outside the police station in Ashton-under-Lyne, so I don't know who's burnt the toast. And the other is just outside your own house on the A49.
And is this recent data?
All the other locations are compliant, and they show over years that declining profile.
Well,
not 2020.
That isn't the data
years.
that I've seen, and obviously the way in which this is measured is an annual average rather than a spot check on any given day. That's how the Joint Air Quality Unit assess it. And to get to air compliance, you have to have 2 consecutive years of the air quality being beneath legal standards. This isn't our policy. We didn't set this policy. That is what the government sets. And the reason why our 10 councils have a legal directive placed upon them is because in the judgment of the Joint Air Quality Unit, they all have a problem. But to go to what the gentleman behind was saying about the size and are there issues now that we can look at? I mean, the best thing I would say is we've almost got to use what we've now achieved to try and get this thing right in a way that people can come back to it. You know, we, the leader of Trafford Council and myself, his committee asked to go back to the government earlier this year in January. I then took that request to the Secretary of State, and it was Greater Manchester who said to the government, will you please lift the legal direction upon us that says you have to have compliance by 2024. The Minister came to Greater Manchester last Friday. She sat down round the table with us, and to be honest, it was constructive, it was positive. We were starting to talk about solutions. This week, we now have a new legal direction that's been served on the 10 councils, and that is a legal direction based on the date of 2026. And I believe that is correct because there's been at least 2 years disruption with the pandemic, And I think this now gives us an opportunity from here to design together a plan that cleans up the air, because I think that has been missed a little bit, why that is important, and it is important to do, but in a way that doesn't threaten people's jobs or their businesses. That's the opportunity we've got, and I believe now we should start getting into solutions of how we can do that together.
So
You are doing. You're destroying people's livelihoods.
well, we're going to come to that in a sec, sir.
£10 or £60 actually clean air. How can they do that? Who was it? The government that told you you had to do 497 square miles of Greater Manchester? Nobody. Who was it that told you you had to charge between £7.50 to £60 a day? A day.
Well, so,
I tell you what.
let me answer the question then.
You refuse to answer
Well,
that question.
I'm about to. I can't answer a question if someone else is asking another one.
We've heard all from one side. Can some of these people stand up and tell everybody who's watching their vested interest in this? Because I have no idea who they are. They could at all.
I have absolutely no vested interest in this whatsoever.
I'll stand up and say
The
what
only
vested
vested
interest I've got.
The vested interest I've got, if I may finish,
If you've said none, you've said none. That'll be
the vested interest I've got is in democracy.
You've said none.
That's
That'll
my
be
vested.
I've got a family business that's been going since 1963.
Yeah.
We don't earn a great deal of money. We have 2 non-compliant vehicles. The VAT.
So you're a trucker.
I've got Luton van.
So you're a trucker. You deliver.
Okay, yeah, let's not get into each other's personal reasons for being here. Adrian, let me just ask you,
So the
from
trucker
what...
here, it was on the side of the kids then. They're all on the side of the trucker.
Okay,
I've got a small shop.
okay. Adrian.
The size and the cost, that's what affects everybody here. The size and the cost, that's rubbish, so don't say that. You tell me why charging me £60 to drive 1 mile from my house in my camper park to a
Sir.
motorway junction is going to clean the air.
Listen, and... Sir! Oi!
Go on.
The mayor is here to answer the questions. You're not here to have a private discussion.
Well, how would you get it in here?
Oh, it's quite simple. Trust me.
On a push bike?
Okay.
There's things in motion to make sure.
Shall I?
Yeah, listen, excuse me. Hi, there are a lot of people here. It's not just for you two to have a private discussion. You can have this afterwards. I think we should just move on to the next question because it is still relevant. It is still relevant.
I would like to answer
Sir,
your
it's still
question.
relevant.
Answer my question.
I'd like to. I wasn't. Well, I can't answer every single question
Okay.
that gets posed to me on Twitter, so let me answer your
It
question.
did when it
I
came to why.
I
That
don't.
was a different one, wasn't it?
Well,
You answered
I
that
think it
one,
was.
but you won't answer anything about who planned the size and who planned the cost.
If you think
other
it's,
than
Okay,
making
you've
it
asked your
sound.
question. Let's hear the
acceptable
answer.
anybody to throw lies around about my wife. Anyway, but that's a different matter. And I'm not going to go into that. I will answer your question. I don't want people to have to pay a charge. That's not the point of the scheme. As I said a moment ago to Anna, if you would all show a bit of self-discipline would be helpful, wouldn't it? So we can discuss the issues and other people in the room can hear the answers. I don't want that to happen. I said to you before, we tried to get as much money as we could out of the government so that people didn't have to pay the charge. It's not the point of the scheme to have people forced to pay charges. The point of the scheme was give them help to change
Okay.
their vehicles. And
Well,
the
I'm glad-
scheme changed when the price of vehicles went up. We consulted on camper vans. Should we have them in the scheme or had we not? And that was still ongoing. But I said last week they should be out of the scheme going forward. So there is an issue we've already resolved. They will be out of the scheme.
All right, well, Roxanne,
So that's an answer.
Roxanne Collins, are you here? Is Roxanne here? No? Okay, I'm going to ask Roxanne's question because it is relevant. You've answered some of it, but Roxanne wants to know, and I think probably quite a few other people, including yourself, sir, what further support will there be for small businesses who she says will be crippled by CAS?
So one of the really positive things that came out of the meeting with the Minister last week was a commitment that we could keep the £120 million that has been committed to the scheme. Now, with the date of 2026, the gentleman on the front row's question, or the way he put his comments before, is relevant because that allows more time for people to upgrade to Euro 6 who might have been planning to do it anyway, Annabelle. So therefore we'll have £120 million to use in a more targeted way to help people to change. And our intention here is to now take that opportunity to design a different scheme that minimises charging, and hopefully, if you could doesn't have it at all. Because our sole objective here is clean air compliance, because that is what we are legally required to do. The councils can't opt in or out and have a referendum, as you suggest. They can't. They've been served with a government directive. They have to do it. Otherwise, they are at legal risk if they don't do it, and council taxpayers are at risk. We are going to clean up the air, but the minute it is compliant, this thing gets switched off. It doesn't become a congestion charge. Cars never get included, and the Chief Constable who's here this evening can verify that I'm already saying to GMP, would the infrastructure be useful to GMP for policing purposes? That is the way this goes. If we can manage a way forward together on this, we can clean up the air. We don't have to see people hit hard with fines, because we don't want to see that, and then we can keep the infrastructure for other purposes.
Is it fair, I suppose, what I'm guessing some people who have businesses are saying, £60 a day seems like an enormous charge. I mean, are people happy to pay any charge at all?
No.
None at all?
We already do. 72% of what we pay in fuel now, 72% is tax. We pay road tax on most vehicles still. We take our vehicles for MOT when they're 3 years old, and strangely, Andy, they pass the emissions test under the MOT. So how come they're not compliant in your world when they're compliant at the MOT station?
Well,
We've paid for these vehicles. You didn't say no to the VAT. You don't say no to the fuel duty. You don't say no to the road tax. Gimme, 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 gimme. And now you want more. And how? Charging these people more to conduct their businesses in and out of the Greater Manchester area by taking money off them every day. How does that help them to be able to afford to buy the very vehicles that you're saying you want them to buy? It does exactly the opposite. It disincents them.
Okay, let's get the answer then.
So let me answer the question, because you're making an argument which I understand, and I actually agree with you. I don't want to see smaller businesses hit, but let me put it to you a different way, so that you understand that there are some benefits to people of what is being proposed, or what was proposed. So take buses. You say, why should anybody pay? No one should ever pay. Go back to 2018. 10% of the buses on the roads of Greater Manchester were clean emission compliant. 10%, 90%, 9 in 10 of our buses were not compliant with Euro 6. And if you think about that, what does that mean? It means buses on the school run often, or on the college run, at the end of a school day, a congregation of them outside, belching out that polluted air, the kids breathing it in. Because of the CAS, 80% of buses in Greater Manchester this year will be compliant. And I'm going to say to you, I do not, yes it is. Yes, no it isn't. No, it is to do with the CAS. And I'm going to say to you, I believe those bus companies have taken us for a ride for years, putting rubbish on our roads, old buses that shouldn't have been on the roads of a city region like this. It is right that the CAS has required them to take old, polluting buses off our roads.
All right.
Which they should do.
Let's...
Right. Correct.
Okay, we've had a lot from this side. I am going to just see anybody over... Sir, you've got your hand up. What's your question?
Hi, good evening, Andy. I'm Raja from National Private Hire Taxi Association. We've discussed on many occasions these issues, and obviously people are very upset, as you can see, on this clean air zone since the cameras have gone up. I mean, obviously, you're saying that it's not your idea. I have spoken to several MPs and ministers, even the Oldham question time, and nobody spoke there on the clean air zone, and I mentioned that. So it's not the government idea. You're saying that clean air, yes, we're not against it. Yeah, we want that, okay, because it's a very sensitive issue. Obviously, 493 square miles is the largest in Europe, in the world. It's only 5 square miles in Birmingham, 20 square miles in London. Why here, sir? It's the 10 councils and the Greater Manchester gentleman sat in the front, and yourself. I have attended meetings, all these meetings, and I've mentioned these. So, obviously, we cannot afford it. £70,000 Hackney Carriage black cab, purpose built, 10% deposit down, that's £900 a month. How can you afford that? No way. Same applies to the private hire, £40,000 electric vehicle. You can't afford it. I know that we've been given, you're going to say, £10,000 for Hackney Carriage, private hire £6,000. It's not enough. You've asked the government, you put everything on hold and pause, and you want more funding. Even though you get more funding, people will be still suffering.
Okay.
You need to reduce all this, rethink and reduce, the square miles.
Thank you. Thank you for your point.
That is exactly what's happening. As I said, I was aware myself in the second half of last year that a plan designed pre-pandemic could not be delivered given the pressure on the cost of vehicles and the lack of availability. And that was the reason why the Clean Air Committee, chaired by Councillor Andrew Weston, passed a vote in early January of the 10 councils to go back to the government, because it's only the government that could lift the legal direction. We couldn't do it unilaterally with a referendum, we just couldn't, it's impossible. So that is the call that went. I went to meet the Secretary of State, his minister eventually agreed with us, and we are now in a position where we can design this in such a way that it helps people modernise their vehicles, but in a time frame that they can deal with. And if you could get to a point where there was no charging, that it was done without it, then of course you would. But the point should be to absolutely minimise that. But the 2026 date gives us an opportunity to plot a much better course to solve this problem. The problem we had was 2024. That was the issue, and that came from the government directive. And I have to say again, the only zone we were asked to model by the government was a charging clean air zone. That is, I can show you, I can prove that to you in the evidence. The GM decision, you are correct to say, was the scope of it and the nature of it. That was a GM decision.
Thanks, Andy. We're going to actually go to a question in our virtual audience. I think Jake is there and can help out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Annabelle. Our first question this evening comes from Mr. Adam Price. Adam, if you'd now like to unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can. Hi, Adam.
I'm fairly new to this. Good evening, Mr. Burnham. I had a question previously, but listening to you this evening making progress, you tell us that you have 80% now buses in Manchester that are compliant. Is that correct? 2 minutes ago you just said you've managed to make 80% of the buses in Manchester compliant.
I think I did say it slightly differently. 80% this year will be. So not all of them, but some of them have orders for retrofit that have been supported through TFGM. So by the end, I think, of this year, 4 out of 5 buses in Greater Manchester will be compliant. You're on mute now. I think
you're on
Adam.
mute. Oh, we can't hear you.
You need to unmute, Adam.
Right. Try again.
Yeah.
Okay, that was without the use of cameras. How much does the cameras cost, and how many vehicles could you have upgraded with that money?
Well, it was though with the prospect of the clean air zone, obviously, that encouraged people to change, and some of those bus operators have been given funding via the Clean Bus Fund to change the infrastructure. If it was all a Greater Manchester decision, as some people continue to suggest it is, then we would have had to pay for those cameras, but we haven't. They have been funded through the central government support, because this is a central government requirement on us, a central government policy. So I don't have the precise figure, to be honest, because, as I say, it's been signed off at that level. And I can say that infrastructure will be used for other purposes, potentially for traffic management purposes, but certainly, if the Chief Constable is interested, for policing purposes beyond the operation of the clean air zone, because it is a temporary clean air zone. It will come to an end. So this investment won't be wasted. Greater Manchester currently lacks ANPR infrastructure, and this system will provide it.
No, we didn't pay for it. It wasn't funded as a ANPR police surveillance system. It was funded as part of the CAZ, was it not? So surely that money, and we need to know who is responsible for wasting that money, which could have been better spent.
Adam, I think the Mayor did answer that first question.
Because you didn't tell me who it was. He just said
It's the
government. Who specifically is in charge? Who do we now write to and address and say,
well, I would
why
write
have you
to the Secretary of State for the Environment, because he's overall responsible for the clean air policy within the Cabinet, but it was the Joint Air Quality Unit that would have signed off that expenditure, working with TFGM, because they would have had to say where it goes. But I don't think you can call it waste, because it's got a job to do to meet the ruling of the High Court, which was the UK has to clean up its air because of the government at the national level losing a court case. So that job has to be done. What I'm saying to you is there is a purpose this infrastructure can fulfil beyond the CAS. And I see that as a policing purpose, primarily, potentially a traffic purpose, management as well.
Adam, thank you very much. Adam, sorry, we're going to move on because I think you've had quite a time. Can I just ask, there's quite a few young, we're all young, aren't we? Younger faces in the audience. Do any of you have a different opinion or the same opinion as some of the people over here? Yes, sir, at the front.
I think I have a different opinion. I think, like, obviously Andy is trying his best, but I feel like the blame is not him, it's to do with central government, and they're lobbying it against him. As a young person, I believe, like, it's the people above him, like in central government, the Secretary of State, Boris and all that. Obviously, they've lied before, and they're still lying, but yet they turn the blame on the north-south divide again. So I personally feel like it's Andy's getting a lot of stick for it, when me personally, and as well as a young person, I don't think it is him, because he does a lot for Manchester, I think, but I genuinely feel like the government above, central government, are the ones to blame, imposing these powers, but then Andy's getting all the stick for them. They're like, oh, they're sticking back.
I wonder that, would you feel differently? I don't know if you drive, but would you feel differently if you drove and car drivers were paying it?
I don't know, I think...
So you would have to pay it, in other words?
I would pay, just because, me personally, I care about the environment, and I don't want my children or my future children to be in a contested environment. And like you said, like, I get a lot of public transport, and I've noticed, like, the buses, a lot of Stagecoach buses are eco-friendly buses. Majority of them are. But as I said, if I do drive, I wouldn't mind paying it, just because I care about the environment. So it'll make me get, it'll stop me driving, it'll make me get public transport more, I get in the tram more, utilising the tram.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the virtual audience, because there is a question that fits in with that, and it's from Scott Walsh. Scott, are you there? Have we got Scott with us tonight? No? Okay, I will ask it then.
Could I pick up on just
yeah,
what was said, though, quickly? Because I'm going to say it, because there is politics here. The government has put a direction on the 10 councils. I've acknowledged tonight that it then was jointly created, what resulted from that direction. But to have the Prime Minister, the Leader of the House, and Conservatives at local level saying it's the Mayor's plan, that is actually... I mean, that is outrageous politics, and it's kind of normal for the times that we're living in, you know, that you can just say something that technically isn't true. I mean, I have not signed an order that brings the Clean Air Zone into being. It is done individually by the 10 councils, and it went through a Conservative council, bear in mind, not just 9 Labour councils. But then to say it's all my plan, it's a kind of trend we've got in politics where the government, for instance, imposes housing targets on the councils, and then they all campaign against the green belt being lost, even though a Conservative government imposes housing targets, or they impose cuts on the councils, and then they all campaign against the council tax rise. It's very similar. It's their policy they are the originators of this situation, and yet they then try and play politics and campaign against it, just as the gentleman on the front row said.
But can you understand, because you're saying it's the combined authority and come up with the plan, but as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, people look to you, that you are in charge.
Yes.
You are the Mayor of Greater Manchester.
They do.
So they undoubtedly are going to see you as responsible for
yes,
this. You must understand
I've been in politics long enough to know that, and sometimes in politics you do have to carry something that you've not necessarily designed. But anyway, I'm not saying that I'm totally disassociating myself. Of course not. what I do is I recognise I'm often on the hot seat with Mike Sweeney, and there'll be people ringing in about council issues, and I will defend the council because that's what I should do, because, you know, and I will defend Bolton Council as well at times for the things that they decide. Because we are Team Greater Manchester, and we work, that's the way that we work. And I accept people will say that things that happen here, it's the mayor's fault, it's this and that. And okay, I get that, and I take on board a bit of that. But I do take objection to the government trying to imposing this without enough money, as they did with Tier 3, and then saying, and it's all the mayor, it's all Greater Manchester. That is wrong. That is not the kind of politics we should have in this country, because it's basically dishonest. So that's all I'm saying. That is my point of view. And we're entitled to fight back a little bit here about what's been done. Well, I mean, that's the council's, isn't it? So, I mean, it's done at that level. Technically, I've said before, I did not sign it off. I did not sign off the plan. I am not the decision maker. If I had had a different view, I couldn't have forced the councils to do something they were not prepared to do. You're shaking your head, but that's just a fact. I'm sorry, but it is. You show me where my signature is on the plan as me putting it through a committee. It's decided individually by the councils.
Found out in January that the costs were going to be what they were. You wouldn't have done anything about it if you hadn't had this backfire.
I already had done. Sorry, but you're wrong again. I already had done.
No, because your comments all the way through, you're backtracking all the time.
No. In July last year, well, let me answer your question. So you've asked something, so it's fair for me to answer. I said last year that I had real worries when the government refused to fund the hardship element of the support package. Basically, we'd asked for extra money for people with the oldest vans, Euro 3 or Euro 4, because those vehicles are worth, let's be honest, a few £100s, and we had a real concern that they wouldn't be able to bridge the gap with the grant that was available. And we said that at the time, and I said at the time, I'm worried about this situation because those people are going to be hardest hit, your window cleaners, whatever, your painters, decorators, they're not going to be able to afford it. So I was worried about that. And as we got into the autumn, and I can show you the FOI if you want to see it of these meetings, I called a meeting with some of the biggest vehicle operators in the country, and I asked them what was going on. Were their vehicles coming onto the second-hand market? Might they sell some of those vehicles to us so that we could match them to people who were going to be struggling? And they said to us, no, not because we don't want to help you, but order books are shut. We can't buy new vans. We won't be putting vans into the second-hand market. And at that point, late last year, I said to TFGM, we've got to look at this. The situation here is something that we need to look at. And research was commissioned into the state of the vehicle market. And it basically confirmed that there was a problem with, number one, availability, and number two, for vehicles that were available, huge price inflation. And that is when I said earlier this year to the leaders, I think we need to take this back. Well, I said it first late last year, but then I said it to them again in January, we're going to need to take this back. The scheme as it was designed is not deliverable without causing real damage to people like the gentleman on the third row there who said he'd be left paying the charge. And the committee in Greater Manchester at that point said to the government, we've tried in good faith to make this work, but we're going to have to hand it back to you because it's beyond us at this point. We can't do it. And that is factually, honestly, what happened.
Okay. We're going to go to our virtual audience because they're sitting there ever so patiently and can't get involved in this conversation. So I think we've got a question from Mark. Can you unmute, Mark? No? Okay. I was told to go. Oh, yeah. Here we go, Mark. Are you there? Are you unmuted? Go on. Speak, Mark. We're all listening.
We can hear you, Mark.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I actually, hi, Andy. Can I actually change my question?
You can.
Referring to the Clean Air Zone framework from the Department of Environment back in February 2020, point 113 actually states the Clean Air Zone proposals are not required to include a charging zone. That's from the government. So who's actually applied the charging zone? If the government stipulates it wasn't them.
So let me read from you. I mentioned the government guidance before, and I want to get this absolutely right so everyone is completely clear. This is the guidance from the Joint Air Quality Unit, that supports the government's clean air plan. So let me quote for you on page 13. It says this: as such, local authorities are required to shortlist and take forward for full modelling the lowest class of charging clean air zone that will deliver compliance in the year after implementation. So what I said before was the only option that they had to model is a charging clean air zone, because that, in the government's view, was the only one that they were certain would deliver compliance. The challenge they gave to councils was, but if you can come up with something else that delivers compliance, well, you are able to do that, but only if you can convince us that it delivers compliance. And it's not just us, Annabelle. The leader of Portsmouth Council that's had to introduce a clean air zone was on the Today programme last week saying we felt we were effectively kind of railroaded into having a charging clean air zone. And that is the policy. And I know we've taken all the flack for this, that Greater Manchester chose it, and all I can say to you is the date that we had in the legal direction of 2024 and that requirement to go as the baseline with a charging clean air zone was a big factor in dictating what plan was developed that Greater Manchester had to put back to the government.
So does that supersede?
Go on, Mark. Go on, Mark.
Does that supersede what was said in February 2020 then by the Department of Environment under their clean air zone framework?
Well, in that, this GM had to do its plan before that, though. You know, so we were served with the letters in 2018 from memory that the councils had to bring forward a plan, and the government directive was signed in March 2020. So, you know, that you were correct. They're not required to, but we would say effectively they are, because they're required to model everything against a charging clean air zone. And unless they can come up with something better that delivers cleaner air more quickly, then they can't go with it. They've got to go with the charging zone. And that is the system. But they're different places. I mean, I don't know, because I wasn't involved in their plan. But why does Birmingham have a charging clean air zone? Why does Bath have one? We're not doing this on our own. This is a government policy. And I would say to you, it would be fairer, at least if you saw that there's more than Greater Manchester that's been involved in creating this situation. You don't seem to do that.
The Leeds City Solicitor was that Leeds was compliant and therefore had no legal basis whatsoever for introducing a clean air zone as they had passed the limit that was required. Your own website, as I've said earlier, shows that we were compliant 2 years ago. Where is the legal justification for us to proceed when Leeds, having complied, has walked away?
Well, as I understand it, Leeds may well still have a problem, but I don't know all of the details there, and we're not privy to the conversations that Leeds has with the Joint Air Quality Unit. Of course, we're not. All I can say to you is the Joint Air Quality Unit still believes Greater Manchester has a significant problem, even coming out of the different years of 2020 and 21. Their modelling says we are still going to be in breach in pretty much, I think, all of our councils.
I think we've covered that. We do have to move on, and we have covered that point quite a lot. The gentleman over there has had his hand up for ages. Go on.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we're all consumers, every one of us in this room, whether we're Conservative, Labour, whatever we are, we're all consumers. Now, everything that we buy to eat, to wear, for our homes, comes in a van or a lorry and is delivered to us. Now, all of these delivery services and lorries are going to have extra costs because of this policy. That extra cost will, of course, be passed on to the consumers, to us. Whether we are car drivers, van drivers, cycle riders, or just pedestrians, we're going to be paying more for our food and our clothing and everything else because of this policy. So why is the Labour authorities, the 8 Labour authorities that voted for it, and the Labour Mayor of Greater Manchester bringing in a policy that's going to affect the poor the most? Because those of us that are fairly well off will be able to roll along with it. Yeah. But the poor are going to be directly affected in extra costs in every single thing that they buy.
Thank you.
Well, the analysis you've just given I'm only going to agree with you, because the analysis that you've just given was what lay behind, if it's your other half next to you there, what I said to your other half a moment ago, which was I was worried about what was going to happen with the cost of living pressure on people.
Well, why don't you fight it?
So we did. But this is the thing, I don't think in people's... we were... No, but if you just take me out on this, if you don't mind, I said to the councils last year, I've come back to this, we're going to have to go back to the government. We're going to have to go back. And I draw a parallel with the Tier 3 debate that we had. They were forcing us to do something, but they hadn't properly funded it. And when the protests from Rethink first started earlier this year, I said that in response. Let's go back together, fight this together, because we can't carry on this basis, because it's going to hit the poorest. It's that gentleman who said before, and I understand his strength of feeling, but people in that position who couldn't change the vehicle would just be left paying the charge. And I couldn't defend that. And that's never what was intended to happen. And that was the reason that we went back to the government. And I know, but that is the fact. That is why we did it. Because if you don't mind me saying, people have been running a campaign where it suited whoever's purposes to make it all about us, as though it was Greater Manchester that we were doing this without any pressure. We just we decided to do it to everybody. But the truth is we hadn't. Yeah, exactly, and that's why we went back. That's why I went back to the government. And we got a result. But if it was all of us as one going back to the government, we might have heard more directly about how unfair this was. Pardon? The result we've got was the legal direction on the 10 councils was lifted earlier this week. And there is now a new one with a date of 2026, which is 2 years beyond where we were before. And for the reasons the gentleman gave on the front, that is a very different ball game to what we had before, because vehicles are being naturally upgraded by the bigger operators, and the air quality, to take your point, sir, which is a fair point, is slowly improving anyway as a result of that change in vehicle that's happening over time.
So perhaps we could wind this bit up by saying, what difference do you think, Andy, that this delay is going to make? Is it going to make a big enough a difference to help some of the people we've heard here tonight?
It is, Annabelle, it definitely is. It's going to make a real difference. Well, I said to you, you asked how. I said before that leisure vehicles, camper vans, motorhomes, horse boxes can be exempted. So that is clear, that can be done. So no. So that's another difference that we agreed with the government last week. We are working with them now, and I think this is right as well, and to be fair to her, Minister Jo Churchill, who came last week, was really fair. She said, let's develop a joint plan. So there's none of this argy-bargy about who's to blame. And they develop a joint plan with them that will finalise in July. And I will commit tonight to publish all of the data that will support the development of that plan. The government wants it to come in later this year. That's what they required in October. But that doesn't mean it's coming in with charges or anything like that. It could just go live to start collecting the data. And our intention is to see if we can get to clean air across Greater Manchester with the minimum level of damage done, if you like, to people's jobs or people's businesses. And if that can be done without charging, we do it without charging.
You can't sit there and tell us that you're going to stop the charging until all this is in place.
Yeah, from May, yes. Yes.
Stopping that.
There's no charging from May. And if you're worried about a camper van, there's no charge at all.
Listen, I'm not here just about my camper van. I'm about the whole thing.
No, we appreciate that.
An objection to clean air at all. I do have an objection is to chopping down trees to put signs up. I have an objection to reducing vehicle lanes to
so I don't. So it was the Highways England.
And I have a problem with charging between £7.50 to £60 a day for a vehicle that penalises hard-working people in Manchester. That's what I have an objection to.
Okay, thank you, because you've all made those points tonight. Thank you very much. We are going to move on. I'm sorry, I know some of you have got your hands up, but we have covered quite a lot on this one subject, and there are other people that want to talk about other things tonight. So we're actually going to get a question now from Elizabeth Stanley, who I think is in the audience. I've done well, haven't I? I'm picking ones where nobody's actually here. I'll try another one in case they are here. What about Stuart Atwood? He's in the virtual audience, but actually I don't think he wanted to ask his own question, so I'm going to ask it for him. Are there any plans to give free travel passes to the over 60s in Greater Manchester? They already exist in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and London.
No, I'm afraid that there aren't. I can't sort of, put a gloss on that one. There just simply isn't the funding to do it. What we do is give people, when they reach retirement age, free bus, free tram and train, which I think is a good package for the payment of £10 to get the pass. That is, we think, a fair package, given that, if you look at what has happened at national level with the retirement age being pushed back in the way that it has, that is, we can sustain that, and we are committed to that. What we're trying to do is bring down the cost of travel for everybody. So basically, if I was to do that, we'd have to have high fares for the younger population, the working age population, so that we could pay for that. And that is not where I'm going with this. What we want is London level fares for Greater Manchester, £1.55 a bus journey. That is what we are trying to deliver. Yes, with London level infrastructure, absolutely, that's what we want as well. So we want levelling up. And I said to the government, levelling up here would mean a transport system that looks like what people have in London. And to be fair to Michael Gove, who I'd had a lot of conversations with this year and late last year, the Levelling Up White Paper commits to London-style public transport for cities outside of London. I think that is a win for Greater Manchester, because that is the argument we've been making to them. What I now need from the government is the funds to deliver it. And we need to not make promises that we can't deliver around free travel for older people, because if we did that, we'd have to raise fares for everybody else, and that's not the way I want to go.
Okay, thank you. Apparently Elizabeth is virtual. Elizabeth, are you there? Can you ask your question to Andy? Hi, Elizabeth.
On mute, Elizabeth, I think.
Elizabeth, you're on mute, I think. We're not hearing you at the moment in here. She's there, but we're not hearing her. Oh, no.
Still on mute.
Okay, we might have to come back to Elizabeth. Okay, let me just see then who else we've got. Is Sarah Prowse in the audience?
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Sarah.
Greater Manchester has some of the wealthiest neighbourhoods, but also the most impoverished in the country. And unfortunately, education outcomes are mirroring this. How do you envisage we can tackle this and use education to counteract the socio-economic inequalities in the region and drive the levelling up agenda?
Yeah. I think that's where levelling up should start, really. And I would want to point to, back on the thing I was just saying around the cost of transport, one of the first commitments I made before I became mayor, and then was determined to deliver when I became mayor, was free bus travel for 16 to 18-year-olds. Because in my view, that's a policy that supports social mobility of kids who can't ordinarily afford the cost of travel or don't have parents that can afford the cost of travel. And it was those young people often who couldn't go to the place that they wanted to go, or couldn't afford to go to college or sixth form college at all. So the R-Pass came in. I think it's already made a massive difference to people's educational opportunities. And I think it ties in really well with what you're doing here at UA 92, where you're, beyond then sixth form college or FE college, opening up routes to degree level for young people who might struggle with the cost of university away from home. I think what you've done with the financial support you're giving to young people with digital connectivity and all kinds of things is absolutely brilliant. I think it's a model for other universities to follow. So for me, you know, if I look at Greater Manchester, I don't think we've ever got the full kind of talent that we've got within our boroughs to come through and to be able to fulfil their potential. And for me, that's what I'm absolutely all about. And I love what you're doing here, but also I think the R-Pass is a really good example of why we should bring down or even make it free the cost of travel for young people who are starting out on their lives, need all of the support that they can get. And the R-Pass is a pilot still at the moment, but I'm determined to make it permanent because I think it is already changing lives in Greater Manchester.
Yes, sir, with Hal.
John Lawrence, is there not a question there off me? I signed on online, but is there a question there from me, please?
I don't know. I haven't got all the names, I'm afraid. But go ahead. Just ask your question.
Andy, as you know, Abbey Air area last year had a sinkhole. What is going to happen to the Abbey Air area in the future?
So that's obviously around Wright Robinson School, isn't it? Gorton area. Yeah. I remember that incident very well. It was around, was it this time last year or just before Christmas? Like, 21st. Yeah, I remember it. And I was in touch with some of the residents.
You spoke to me in April, before the elections.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Well, I mean, I don't, the issues that you're having to deal with were housing issues, weren't they?
Manchester City Council.
Yeah, and as I've said before, I don't run the councils and I'm not responsible for all their policies. What I tried to do was help the residents affected.
You didn't help us, Andy.
Well, I did help some of them. I did. I don't think so. It's not fair that because...
No, it is fair. We were left destitute. Me and my son lost our home and everything in it. Manchester City Council have just bullied us. They've been absolutely cruel.
Well,
it needs a complete overhaul because you're in distress when you pick that phone up to the homeless. We weren't homeless, by the way, we're displaced. That's our correct status. But they don't want to use that because under that legislation, they would have had to help us retrieve or replace our belongings. They left us destitute. I had to borrow £200 off my sister just to buy things like towels, underwear, underclothes. I lost everything.
Andy, also, the thing is in the Abbey Air area, and you'll know this is ongoing. It's happened many times over 15, 20 years, these sinkholes, on that Hyde Road area. Something's got to be done, and really, in the long term, I would think that you'd be thinking about wiping out all the area, knocking all the houses down and rebuilding. Is that something that would be coming up, maybe?
Well, I know some of them are, well, we saw, didn't we, structurally are not in a good shape at all, are they?
No. The builders that had to pull mine down in the end said it was a shame to pull my home down. They asked me if I'd had a new roof. It's 26 years old. I've never had anything structural done to it. And they said it was a shame to pull it down.
Okay.
Plates were practically brand new.
I don't know about your... Well, there was with some of the other properties.
No. We've had an interim geotechnical survey done, and independent, and it's pointing finger at United Utilities, but also at Manchester City Council and the state of the road.
Well, you said I didn't do anything, but that it isn't entirely fair because I did. Well, I know, but let me just answer. I know it's your view, and I know it's your view, and I appreciate that that's your view, but I'm just trying to tell you why I don't think it's entirely fair, because let me just explain why I don't. Because I spoke to the residents about, I don't know, a week, 10 days after it happened on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't, it wasn't necessarily my responsibility, but there was, as I said, January, February last year. Well, no, because I wouldn't have picked up the phone to you all if I wasn't in control of the solutions. But what I did, wait a second, what I did do following that was I had a meeting with United Utilities, because the gentleman just said it was clear that they bore some responsibility for the situation. And I asked United Utilities to fund support for people. And as I remember it, and I may have this wrong, and you might know more of the facts, they funded accommodation for people at, I think, the Village Hotel in Denton for some of the residents affected.
I'll tell you what happened. Manchester City Council did not want to know from the minute it happened. renters were on the other. Our councillor ferried them one by one away, and we had to go to her at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and say, what happens with us? She'd go to the Shore Start Centre. We were still sat there at 8 o'clock when Afzal Khan, who's our MP, tweeted, oh, they've all been relocated, all the residents. And my son took a picture of us all sat there and said, well, we're not. What's happening with us? It wasn't the council that turned up 20 minutes later, United Utilities. And they said as a goodwill gesture, because really it's the council's responsibility, that they funded 2 weeks in a hotel at the back of Castleton, and it was like a ghost town, because people have got short memories, everything was closed. We couldn't get hot food, it was freezing, and all we had was a kettle and a TV in the room.
Okay.
I mean, the room was lovely, don't get me wrong, but then Manchester City Council and United Utilities on the 9th of February had a meeting where Manchester City Council took a legal liability to support and look after the evacuees. Well, they never did that. They've never done that with me. They've never discussed my immediate situation, not once. I can't wait till we get to court.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because it does sound like you've had a truly dreadful time, and I don't know if perhaps afterwards, I don't know, Andy, if afterwards anybody can help. What's your name, sorry? Bernadette. I mean, maybe this could be something we could deal with perhaps afterwards, if that's all right, just because obviously there's a lot of questions here.
I do feel for you, Bernadette, and I think I do remember talking to you around the time, and I spoke to other residents as well, not just yourself. So it wasn't the case that I didn't, I did try to help. I did have a meeting with United Utilities. That goodwill gesture, I think, I was part of getting happen. Well, but they extended the stay for a number of people at a different hotel. So all I can say to you is, it's not, again, I don't run Manchester City Council, but I did refer some people to them to try and get help. I'm more than happy to see if I can still help you in your situation if you want. Okay, well, I'll get some details off you at the end, and I will try and help if that's of any use to you.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you. Let's go to our virtual audience, and we've got a question, I think, from Barbara Guest. Oh, yep, there's Barbara. Hi, Barbara.
On mute, Barbara. You think 2 years into the pandemic we would have got the hang of mute, wouldn't we?
Hi, Barbara. We're not hearing you. I've got to just try and give some of the virtual audience a chance, I think. I don't know, we'll try one more. Joe Perry. Is Joe Perry there? Not on mute. Come on, Joe. Make it on night. Yay. Okay. No, Joe, you're on mute.
Is somebody need to unmute everybody? Or?
Is it this end? She's nodding. Oh, no.
It's at this end, I think, by the looks of it, isn't it? Because everyone can't unmute. So.
Are you going to help us unmute people, sir? Just let's see if we can get Joe for... Well, perhaps while we're doing that, have you got quite a quick question? Yeah. Brilliant. Go on.
Experienced runner for 43 years, ran 2 Boston Marathons, 84 and 96. It was 100 years old. So I don't mess about with distances. Why every weekend, when I want to go into Manchester from Withington, for the sake of 400 metres, which they call the Curry Mile, do I have to go left onto Platt Lane and do 3 miles on a public transport bus that you're saying about congestion? Every weekend. Did you authorise that?
Sorry, explain. I don't understand what you're saying. The bus is...
The bus is on a weekend,
yeah,
coming from Withington.
Yeah.
When they get to Platt Lane with no signal, never tell you the driver, turn left down Platt Lane, go all the way down to Lloyd Street. To cut long story short, it's 3 miles. I'm an experienced runner for the sake of 400 metres for the Curry Mile to accommodate all them people who break the law left, right and centre, week in, week out, Ramadan, you name it, 3-point turns. Why does that bus have to go left?
Well...
Did you authorise that?
No.
Well, that's what goes on. Do you know that goes on? Every weekend?
No, I didn't know that. So...
Well, can you look into it for me, please?
Look into it, yeah.
Every weekend, when you get to Plattfields toilets, what used to be public toilets, it turns left. And it does 3 miles for the sake of 400 yards to Whitworth Park. That's all it is. Forget the name Curry Mile, it's 400 yards long. I have to go 3 miles round, all the buses down to residential areas in Fallowfield and Platt Lane. You know
All
that
right,
area,
so
don't you?
you don't know about it, but you can
Bob, I mean, we've got Bob Morris here from Transport for Greater Manchester. Bob, do you,
Every weekend.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Here we
well,
are.
you've raised an issue. You deserve an answer, but I think we'll get you an answer, basically, is what we'll do.
I'll catch up with you at the end if that's okay.
Yep, okay. I think we're going to go back to Jo, who is in our virtual audience, and we should be able to hear her now. Hi, Jo. Oh, dear. No.
It's not having it, is it?
Oh, that's such a shame, isn't it? Okay, we're not going to be able to go to... Oh, who was
Sorry,
that?
Annabelle, I was just going to say, Joe, if you just click the small microphone icon in the top right of your screen, you'll be able to unmute yourself.
The small what icon?
Okay, there's a lady there in the audience. I'm so sorry, Joe. We'll try and come back to you, but we'll have to take another one from the audience.
The microphone icon is down at the bottom left of
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Hi Andy, I'm Megan. I'm a primary school teacher in Wythenshawe. This week is Child Mental Health Week. Since the pandemic, we're really struggling to get our children seen with social, emotional, mental health needs. Can I just ask kind of what initiatives and what is being done to help reduce waiting times? It's currently 18 months for CAMS and we're really struggling.
Yeah, no, you're right to raise it. You're really, really right to raise this issue. The demand for support has just, as you know anyway, it's jumped up, hasn't it? And it's way ahead of where the level of provision is at. And I know this from some things I've had to deal with myself. It's not fair, is it? And the waiting times are too long. So you're absolutely right. No, this is recognised. There is work underway at a Greater Manchester level to improve access. It's no substitute, but there were digital services for young people that were introduced during the pandemic, and they're being extended so that they're still available. But I'm not going to say that that's an adequate replacement, because it isn't necessarily. Well, it's not. So, the mental health support for young people isn't where it needs to be. It is a big priority. I think one of the problems we had was the catch-up funding. You remember the national approach to catch-up for education? The package that they came forward with was £15 billion, but it wasn't funded. And we were waiting to use some of that funding to put in place extra support in schools. So we continue to make the argument for that. And we are working at a Greater Manchester level to improve access. We had a mentally healthy schools programme, which we introduced. I don't know whether your school benefited from that. It wasn't in every school. But we understand the issue that you're raising, and there is a lot of work underway on it.
All right, I'm going to ask the question from Elizabeth, because I don't know if we can get them in the virtual audience at the moment. But Elizabeth asks, the Disabled Children's Partnership campaign is calling for local authorities and CCGs to prioritise recovery and support for disabled children and young people. What can be put in place by the 10 local areas in Greater Manchester to work together to help families of these children?
Yeah, I know the amazing work Elizabeth does working with parents who've got young people with special educational needs. I've met and discussed those with her, and I think we've got Deanne Shaw with us tonight as well, who's done some fantastic work as well. The pandemic has caused even more difficulty, if you like, for young people who've got those additional needs and haven't been supported. I think this is something that is wrong about the way we run things. Why do parents who have kids with those needs face a battle to get the help that they need? It shouldn't be so. It should be the opposite. They should just get the support that they need without having to fight for it. Deanne and Elizabeth have put a thought to me at some point about how we might kind of reform the way this works in Greater Manchester. Could we give those families an advocate, for instance, so they don't have to fight the system and get passed from pillar to post? Could we support them to navigate the system? Could we bring some of the services together around those young people? The commitment that I made on this is that we're going to have a discussion on special educational needs at the Greater Manchester Reform Board soon, with the 10 councils, the NHS, all the public services, to see if we can up our game, because I think those young people need to be prioritised coming out of the pandemic.
Thank you. Right, I think I'm being told we do have a problem with Teams. So we're not excluding everybody in the virtual audience. We're really sorry that you
sorry,
can't.
Joe.
I think, is it worth trying one more? I'm going to look if Jake shakes his head. Jake, is it worth trying one more time? Yeah, okay. It's a kind of a nod. So is anybody stick their hand up in the virtual audience? Joe, do you want to try again with your question? I think you've got to, apparently you have to unmute a button, a small microphone icon in the corner, if that makes sense. No.
It's not having it, is it?
No. I'm so sorry. Oh, has she? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Joe's question, which she's been dying to ask all night. Will you be working with Trafford Council to implement safe cycling infrastructure along the A56 as envisaged in the original B-Lines plan?
Well, absolutely, if Trafford want to do that. So the money that we put into the original B network, which is that segregated cycling and walking provision that Chris Boardman helped advise us on, is the money is there, and it's for councils to decide where they want to prioritise and the schemes that they want to bring forward. I think, Joe, to get very specific about the A56, I think Trafford Council have been doing a consultation on the temporary bike lane that's there, and been canvassing views about what is the permanent solution. So as part of that, obviously, if Trafford wanted to come to me and say, can we use some of the Mayor's Challenge Fund to do something different, of course I would want to work with them, because that is a key route into the city. So I'm ready to kind of work with the council on the back of the consultation, and I think if we could do something that keeps the traffic flowing but gives cyclists a real good, safe option, then that's the ideal solution, I think.
Give us a nod, thumbs up if you're happy with that, Joe. Yep. Well,
Ish.
yeah, not sure. Text me if you're not.
I'll take an ish tonight.
Okay, Barbara Guest also can't get through, but she's saying, when will the Mayor be publishing an action plan for delivery of the gender-based violence strategy? Some activities have happened and some funding for Safer Streets Fund has been acquired, but it's important that we can see a 3 to 5 year plan with clear indicators for success so that we can measure effectiveness.
So the Deputy Mayor is leading this work and is chairing the board on gender-based violence, and I think that plan will be coming forward this year as signed off by that board. But Barbara, one thing I would point you to is something that I made a personal commitment to bring forward following the tragic murder of Sarah Everard and some of the other awful incidents that we saw, murders that we saw last year. I said that we needed to start a new conversation here in Greater Manchester, because nationally people were saying women should do this, that or the other, and women should go this way home and hail a taxi, or all as though it was a problem that women had to solve. And I said, well, it really came home to me at that point that was absolutely the wrong way to go at it. This one is on men, lads and boys. This is one where we've got to take responsibility, we've got to own it, we've got to say, if we are aware, we've got to challenge ourselves about whether our own behaviour is acceptable, but also others who we may know. And late last year, you may have seen, and this was part of a delivery of the gender-based violence strategy, we launched a new high-profile campaign as part of that, which I personally wanted to bring forward. It was called Is This Okay? And it showed a young woman running in the park and then going through her day, subject to various things, comments, and she turns to the camera again and said, is this okay? And that video is now being taken into schools. I was with Phalange Park High School in Rochdale a couple of weeks ago, and was talking to the students there about, we watched the video and I started to say to them, what do you think about this? And I said to the lads, come on, this is for us to sort of solve this one. What do you think? And it sparked a really, really serious and important conversation. So we are taking the plan out very practically in that kind of way. The Is This Okay campaign will develop throughout this year. I don't know whether the Chief Constable wants to say something about this, because women and girls' safety is something that I think we need to do a lot more on. If we're honest, we are not the safest place, are we, for women and girls to be out using public transport, going home at night. Obviously, we're making commitments around more police officers, but particularly more officers on the transport system. This is a very big priority for us. And it is also linked to wider issues around child sexual exploitation, young women who are victims of abuse or have been. It's about a culture where victims are always supported when they come forward, and we know under the previous leadership, Greater Manchester Police was found wanting on that point. The Chief and I have agreed that we need a victim-centred culture at the heart of Greater Manchester Police. We need to take issues around child sexual exploitation incredibly seriously, and we'll be reporting soon on the second stage of the inquiry into Oldham. That is coming as soon as we can resolve some final issues there. Our commitment on this issue is at a very high level indeed, and the actions in the gender-based violence strategy will be coming forward throughout this year.
Can I just say something about the gender-based violence, please? Have we got a microphone?
Yeah.
I like how you mentioned Sir Everard, but you didn't mention Sarah Hussein, East Street, Bury, burnt to death right outside her house. Teresa Brown, raped and murdered by 3 men in Bury. You never mentioned that. The Sarah Hussein case, it's been in the newspapers once. It's been silenced since then. Why is that? Is that because of political correctness? Because she was a Muslim and it looks like an honour-based violent crime? Honestly, you've got to really be careful with that gender thing, because some people, it's all right, you can do stuff for if they get beaten up, but other people, you won't even mention it, Andy. I've replied on it about half a dozen times. I've been down to East Street. I talked to a Muslim man who said it was honour violence. That's what he said. That's what he said. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to apologise to the police and you. I always give the police an hard time. There's no wonder why I have to, and everyone will agree. I mean, GMP officer jailed for trying to abuse an 8-year-old kid. A Metropolitan inspector done for voyeurism. The police are a national disgrace. I said this in Oldham and I'm saying it again, you're a national disgrace. The police system, it's all messed up. I want better recruiting and better vetting. We've got the £3 million chop shop that we just broke up from the Midlands and in Oldham. They got £150,000 COVID bounce back loans. And one of the guys had 21 convictions and 48 previous offences. And what did Judge Cross said, that the public demand an explanation of why you're failing us. Honestly, police, I'm sorry, chiefs, and I'm sorry, Mayor.
Right, well, if you sit down, we've got the two top men here. Okay. We've got the Chief Constable, we've got the Police and Crime Commissioner, both responsible for crime. I'll come to you first, Andy. He says it's a disgrace. The Greater Manchester Force is a disgrace.
Not what I want to...
Oh, nationally? Well, he can only speak for Greater Manchester, obviously.
I'll obviously let the Chief say what he wants to say, but let me say what I'm responsible for, because you made a comment there, which I know, people might think, and I want to address it directly, that we would look the other way from a certain community, that, you would think, oh, well, that's too sensitive. So let me directly answer that question from you before I hand over to the Chief on other things. It was within days that I came into office in 2017 that the Three Girls programme was on the BBC. And I watched that, and I was in post. I didn't know the full background to that. It was the first time that I'd fully understood. I'd been a bit involved as Shadow Home Secretary on the Rotherham situation, and I'd worked with Sarah Champion on that, so I had some experience with these issues. And then I saw that programme. And then I heard Maggie Oliver, who is a former Greater Manchester Police inspector, who was involved in some of the original investigations into this back in the decade before last, on the radio the next day in response to that programme, saying that she had a major investigation underway and it was shut down overnight. Now, I heard that said on the radio, and on the back of that, I instituted a major independent review of child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester on the back of that, led by the team that had carried out the Rotherham review, which everybody had accepted was rigorous in terms of the work that they did. Now, it's taken longer than I would have liked, but the first stage of that review into Maggie Oliver's allegations concerning Manchester and what was called Operation Augusta, reported in January 2020. And that's out there, and you can see that, and there have been actions to follow up that report. The second stage of that review, which is ongoing, is into Oldham, and that is coming, I hope, within a matter of weeks, but it is currently, well, I won't go into all the issues why, but it's about making sure victims' voices are properly heard, because I will not ever have a situation where the point is to hear their voice, and this is why we are just making extra steps now to ensure that. There will be a third stage to this review into Rochdale. So all I can say to you is I don't do that. Child abuse of children should be fully examined, and those responsible brought to justice, whoever they are, wherever they come from. No excuses, no nothing. And that's my approach, and I can assure you that's my approach.
All right, so we're going to come now to the...
I said about vetting, and
let's hear from the...
I liked the Oldham chief, I really did. I liked the words he said. He said he was only in there for a month. I liked what he said, and Andy, I want to have faith in the police, but sex offenders, voyeurism, gangsters...
Yeah, okay, so let's hear from Stephen Watts, the Chief Constable here.
Do you mind if I stand up and face the audience? I'll face that way, shall I? It's traditional to face the people you're talking to. So, good evening, folks. There's a lot in that. Let me just start by endorsing what the Mayor's just said. Let's be absolutely clear. If you abuse children, you're going to be brought to book. It doesn't matter who you are, in what circumstances. There isn't anybody here who does not think that this is abhorrent behaviour. It is absolutely the case, and we've seen this in Rochdale and Oldham and Rotherham and Telford and Halifax, and on the list goes. We have not got this right, and I'm not hiding away from that. The point is, my previous force was South Yorkshire. I sorted out Rotherham, and anything of that ilk will be sorted out here too. I think insofar as the originating question, it was about violence against women and girls. And that too is a really, really important issue. And again, I endorse the point that the Mayor's made. This is about men owning their behaviours. Most violence against women and girls is perpetuated by people who should love and care for them. Most violence against women and girls is in the domestic setting. We have to be better at that. Zero tolerance for domestic abuse. Again, there is a real commitment. We're doubling the size of our road transport policing community such that we can put people onto public transport in much greater numbers and be very much more assertive about it. There is the nighttime economy, people misbehaving themselves in drink. We are absolutely going to do more in that space too. And so in broad sweep terms, we are part of the Deputy Mayor's goal group in terms of gender-based violence. We are about to surface our own violence against women and girls strategy. The outcomes that we are seeking to perpetuate against people who commit these offences will increase. Of that there is little doubt. And the last point that I would make is around notions of police legitimacy, because that's what it turns on. When you talk about these high-profile cases of police officers misbehaving themselves, I'm not here to defend police officers who misbehave themselves. I stand with you in the condemnation of police officers who misbehave themselves. I do think it's a bit of a stretch, however, to cast aspersions against all 140,000 police officers in this country on the basis of the actions of a minority of people. I'm not arguing that there isn't a cultural issue that needs addressing, and sometimes these things are surfaced in what happens. But what I do know, and I've been in policing for 34 years, this is my 6th police force, that I do have the privilege to lead thousands of really courageous people who every day genuinely put their lives on the line to protect, to do what it is that people think the police do. And the vast majority of those people are decent, they're honest, they're loyal, they're courageous, and we should respect what they do. For those who let the side down, we need to root them out and boot them out. And I can assure you of this, as somebody who used to lead for the country, for combating corruption, a full 90% of all corrupt police officers are outed by their own colleagues. Most people have a right to expect that, but I promise you this faithfully, there is nothing like the hue and cry from amongst police officers when one of their own is found to be corrupt.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we are running out of time, and I'm under pressure to just try the virtual room one more time. So, Dave Laurie, let's see how you get on. We've got our last chance. Go for it, Dave.
Oh, God.
No. I'm really sorry. I think we've got a problem with Teams. We've got 3 minutes left. So I know you've already asked a question. Do you mind, if it's about the clean air zone, we've covered that. Okay, we'll do one on council tax, as long as it's a short question, because I think we're going to run out of time. Thank you.
You're putting up £22 in Manchester council tax, and £10 is for the buses. Why? When they've already been given 5.6 billion by the central government.
Okay. This is actually a issue that's going to be debated at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority tomorrow here in Trafford, but your figures aren't exactly right. So the precept with regard to my responsibilities is going up £7 for a Band D property, but for 85-90% of people in Greater Manchester that will be about a £5 increase. Why is that needed? Well, you are correct to say it's needed to change buses in Greater Manchester. We've had, well, shake your head because it is a fact. People can't just deny when you're asking a question. We've had 35 years of a deregulated transport system. I have taken the decision to put buses under public control, and that process starts now. It goes this year, and we have to ourselves make some contribution to changing the way our buses work so we can get that London-style system. But you say, but the government's fully funded it. Well, I'm sorry, it hasn't. It said it was going to put £3 billion nationally into bus improvement, and it's cut that in half, and it's told us all we won't be getting the money that we thought we were getting. So that is true. And there's a second problem, and it's in the newspapers today, COVID support for buses, because buses are carrying about 75%, Bob, of the people they were before the pandemic. They have an ongoing shortfall, and the government support that's been making up that shortfall is, as we understand it, going to expire at the end of March. So that is another risk that we've got to the bus system. So with all of that in mind, and knowing that the public want to see buses change here, we are asking, and it's hard to ask for anything in these times for the reasons we've all discussed tonight, but we are asking for a modest increase so that we can successfully deliver the return of buses in Greater Manchester to public control, buses that work for people, not for profits. That is what I think people here want, and that is what the increase will help to deliver.
I'm sorry, we've run out of time. I know, and you have asked a question. I do apologise, unless you want to take one quick one.
I will. I'll take another
Go
one.
on.
No,
very quick.
So, 2 questions, quickly.
No!
No, okay,
No!
One long one.
No, not one long
okay,
one, one short one.
One question is, when we were in Tier 3, you were the only one who campaigned for us, making us get out for it. As a young person myself, my mental health was affected during the pandemic, but you were the only one who was lobbying against these Tier 3 restrictions. And because of this, a lot of young people's mental health have been affected. What do you think central government should do to help the North out? And when you come on my podcast, I tweeted you last time.
Right, I will. I'll come on it. But the answer to the question is, I know people may not, I know politicians aren't everyone's flavour of the month, however, but I went into Parliament to be the MP for Lee, and I was privileged to be the MP for Lee, to fight for the north of England. And without sort of going into all the details, I kind of fell out of love with Westminster and did my own party to some degree, because I got down there and found that it was a very London-centric world. And I particularly found that when I stood up and said I wanted to reopen Hillsborough. And that was like, for me, in my own sort of just personal situation, was like a massive thing that was life-changing from my point of view. But when you do that, you kind of see the full nature of the country, if you like, in terms of the way the voice of people here doesn't carry in the same way as the voice of people from other parts of the country. And if I stand for anything, I stand for that people here should be heard the same and treated the same as anyone anywhere else. And the truth is, we're not at the moment, and we saw that during the Tier 3 debate. I can only say to everybody in this room that when I was having those arguments with the government, they were mainly behind the scenes to begin with. I knew they weren't going through what we were going through and what you were going through, and young people around here. And I know now that they really weren't, because of what was going on down there at that time when we were making that argument. And it does make me frustrated, because they wouldn't do to London what they did to us. In fact, days later, after they tried to impose Tier 3, they came up with a whole load of money when London had to go into Tier 2. But I'm still fighting for these things. I'm not here to make it hugely party political. If the government are serious about levelling up, I will work with them. You know, I've kind of left that point-scoring thing behind. If they will work with us to improve people's lives in this place that we call Greater Manchester, then I will work with them. And yeah, I don't think they had got that clean air plan right with the money that they gave us, but then we've gone back to them and they've been prepared to sit down with us. And that is, I know people won't feel it, but it's a different version of the same issue, where we always have to fight to get what is fair and right for people here. The last one is the rail plan. They've imposed a cut price rail plan on us, where they promised us a new line, they're giving us half a new line. It's not right. And I stood up with all the other mayors of the North this week and said, we are not going to accept it, because the North was promised more than this, and we are not going to accept second best again. If I did, I would be condemning future generations of Northerners always to be treated as second-class citizens when it comes to public transport in this country, and we're not prepared to do it. So we're taking a stand on that and on other things. But if they are committed to levelling us up, if they're committed to giving us London-style transport, then I will work with them. But at the end of the day, if they're not prepared to treat the North in the same way that they're prepared to treat the South, then I will always, always call that out.
Good last question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Particularly thank you to our virtual audience. You've been really, really patient. One of you even managed to cook your tea during it, which was really interesting for many of us to enjoy that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Andy. And I'm sorry if you didn't get to ask your question, but I think we got through an awful lot. So thank you very much for your time and your patience, and have a safe journey home.
Thank you.
Thank you.